Breaking news, another big defeat for Donald Trump and the Republican National Committee, this time handed to them by the Nevada State Supreme Court. Welcome back to Democracy Docket. I'm Marc Elias.
And I'm Paige Moskowitz. Let's get started. Nevada law says that mail-in ballots sent back by Election Day and received within 3 days of the general election should be counted. Now, this applies to ballots with a postmark, with an ineligible postmark, or a missing postmark, but are assumed to be sent back by Election Day. Trump and the RNC challenged this state law in court. Marc, what was the GOP's argument against the law, and what did the Nevada Supreme Court just do?
So look, the Republican argument against the law is they don't want people to vote, right? I mean, like they came up with some legal theories, and I'll tell you what those are, Paige. But let's just keep in mind, Republicans go from state to state to state and find every cockamamie reason. How's that for a good legal term, Paige? Every cockamamie reason to say that lawful votes should be thrown out, that lawful voters should be purged, that accurate election results shouldn't be certified. I mean, they are in a desperate effort right now, as we have seen over the last few months, and as Democracy Docket has covered, to file lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit on all different theories, all with one thing in common, and that is to undermine the results of free and fair elections. So in this case, what they argued is that ballots that have missing or ineligible postmarks that came in a couple of days, or a day or two, or a couple of days after the election shouldn't count, notwithstanding what Nevada state law says. And, they argued that it's diluting lawful votes. They lost on that. They've argued that it violates the state's statutes. Well, it doesn't violate the state statutes. It's consistent with the state law. And so they lost overwhelmingly 7-0 in the Nevada Supreme Court. But, Paige, they had lost a similar lawsuit, a nearly identical lawsuit already in federal court. And that just goes to show you how doggedly they are going after these issues involving these mail-in votes.
Right, Marc. In fact, challenging Nevada's mail-in ballot receipt deadline was the first lawsuit that the RNC and the Trump campaign jointly filed this year. Like you said, they filed 2 lawsuits about it, one in state court, one in federal court. They've lost both of these lawsuits so far.
And, Paige, I want to make sure people are paying attention to what you just said, because this was the first set of cases that Donald Trump's campaign brought lawsuits over, right? We've seen Republican Party lawsuits. We've seen right-wing vigilante groups. We've seen the vote suppressing operation on the outside, a multi-million-dollar voter suppression litigation war machine. But these were the first lawsuits that Donald Trump put his campaign's credibility, such as that is, and name on the line. And they lost both of them. And it tells you something, Paige, how desperate they were in this very, very important swing state of Nevada, that this was the lawsuit, along with the federal case, that they chose to put Donald Trump's name into.
This mail-in ballot receipt deadline law was enacted in Nevada in 2021. Why wait until 2024 to challenge it in court?
Because they're afraid they're going to lose. Why wait till 2024? Because Donald Trump didn't become the standard bearer of this party. I mean, he's been the sort of the moral inspiration of this party, unfortunately, for years, but he didn't become the standard bearer of the party until earlier this year in 2024. And when he did, his message to the Republican Party was, don't worry about getting out the vote. Don't worry about registering voters. Just focus on voter suppression. And he replaced Ronna McDaniel with Mike Whatley in order to effectuate that. And so in 2024, the Republican Party went into overdrive to throw out as many ballots as you can. And when you talk about Nevada being a very closely divided state, he thinks that these ballots could be the difference between him winning and losing. And so rather than trying to persuade more voters to vote for him, rather than trying to persuade them on the issues, he holds these fascist rallies in Madison Square Garden, right? He's doing that. So this is his compensation for that, right? Which is to try to throw out votes. Paige, but he didn't win this lawsuit. And if you want to know more about the lawsuits he's losing, but what he's planning for the post-election, there is a great Democracy Docket event coming up on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. It'll be me, Jamie Raskin, and Brian Tyler Cohen, and we're going to break down for you everything happening between now and Election Day and in the post-election. So please make sure you join this free event. The description is in the show notes below or in the link above.
Marc, focusing on the actual ruling from the Nevada Supreme Court, the court really focused on the legislative purpose of this law, which was to expand the right to vote. The justices noted in their decision, as explained in the legislative history, the purpose of the bill was to expand the ways in which people vote and make it easier for voters to exercise their freedom to vote. If a voter properly and timely casts their vote by mailing their ballot before or on the day of the election, and through a post office omission, the ballot is not postmarked, it would go against public policy to discount that properly cast vote. Why was it important for the court to note that the purpose of this law was to expand the right to vote in its ruling?
Well, I think for two reasons. First of all, because it helped illustrate how to understand the text of the law. The Republicans are arguing that the text was ambiguous, and I think the justices wanted to be clear that the text has to be read against the purpose of the law, which was to enfranchise voters, number one. Number two, I think the court wanted to take to task the underlying theory that the Republicans were offering here, which is that when in doubt, throw away ballots. That's what the Republicans were saying, is when in doubt, disenfranchise voters. And I think the court wanted to lay down a clear marker, not just in this case, but in future cases, that the Nevada Supreme Court is not going to interpret laws in a way that is going to unnecessarily disenfranchise voters. So I think this was a very important passage from the state Supreme Court, and I'm glad they included it.
The ruling also directly refuted the GOP's argument that it's the responsibility of the voter to make sure that their ballot is postmarked. Republicans had said that voters should go take their mail-in ballot to a post office in person and request the clerk or associate there to ensure that their ballot is postmarked before it's returned.
Paige, who does that? Like, who says I'm going to put something in the mail? So what that means is I'm going to go to a post office myself. I'm not going to put it on my mailbox outside my house. I'm not going to drop it in a mailbox, outside the post office. I'm not even going to put it in the slot inside the post office. I'm going to wait in line and go up to the counter and then say, yes, Mr. or Ms. Postal worker, would you please take my piece of mail, my ballot, and postmark it in front of me? Because if you just take it and you put it in the system, it may not get postmarked, or there may be a smudge, and then the Republicans will say it's my fault that my ballot didn't count. It's a preposterous set of facts that they've laid out here. It is an unbelievable window, though, into the way in which they view voting, which is that they view it as a series of traps for the voters, a series of hurdles that the voters need to overcome. And if the voters don't overcome every hurdle, it's kind of their fault. That's the Republican theory of voting, is they want to make it harder to vote. And as we're going to talk about undoubtedly in the weeks to come, they want to make it easier to cheat. And if you want to stay up to date on what they are doing to make it harder to vote and easier to cheat, make sure you are subscribed to Democracy Docket. You will get a free daily and weekly newsletter that will keep you up to date on everything happening to democracy in court. And there has never been a more important time to stay up to date than now. The link is in the show notes below or right above.
Now, Nevada isn't alone in having a law like this. 19 states plus DC accept mail-in ballots that are sent back by Election Day and received in the days after. Marc, why is it important that so many states have a law like this?
Because it's common sense. It's a common sense provision. And frankly, all 50 states should have this. I wrote a piece for Democracy Docket back in March of 2020 called The 4 Pillars to Protect Voting Rights with Vote by Mail. And this was right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I laid out 4 things that every state should do. And one of them was that ballots postmarked by Election Day or relinquished by the voter by Election Day need to count, regardless of whether it takes a day or two after the election for them to come in. No voter should be disenfranchised because the U.S. Postal Service is slow. No voter should be disenfranchised because, their ballot sat an extra day or two in a sorting facility. And so this is a critical reform that every state should have. But the fact that, about half the states have it is what I'd say is a good start. But we should expect more. And when we get into 2025, I certainly hope more states pick this up and pass laws to provide for this.
And we know that there have been delivery issues with the USPS recently. In fact, this morning, the Postal Service released a new statement encouraging voters who live in states that require mail-in ballots to be in the hands of election officials on Election Day to return their mail-in ballots by tomorrow, Tuesday, October 29th. The USPS is telling voters that they should give them at least a week to return their mail-in ballots and make sure that they're to officials on time. So these laws are important. Like we said, 19 states plus DC have them. And the Nevada ruling this morning wasn't the only recent court ruling involving mail-in ballot receipt deadlines. On Friday, the Fifth Circuit struck down Mississippi state law that says mail-in ballots that are sent back by Election Day can be counted if they are received by officials within 5 business days of the election.
Yeah, this has been a large, multi-state, widespread effort by the Republican Party to attack these laws. So, we have seen the Republican National Committee file lawsuits against these laws in Mississippi, as you just mentioned, Illinois, North Dakota, Nevada, as we've been discussing, to challenge these laws that allow ballots to be counted, mail-in ballots to be counted, if they were received after Election Day but are relinquished by the voter in advance of Election Day. They've had universal defeats in these laws until, as you point out, recently, when the RNC was able to score at least a partial victory in the Fifth Circuit. Now, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, very conservative. I'm sure many people have read about how conservative it is, but they held that the Mississippi law that allows for ballots to be counted that are received after Election Day violates federal law. I think this is wrong, but that's what they ruled. But here's the deal, Paige. They specifically said they were not going to give a remedy in this case. What does that mean? It means that they were not going to block the Mississippi law from being in effect for this election cycle necessarily because of how close it is to the election. Instead, they said they would send it back down to the trial court for a remedy. As a practical matter, given the time frame and the calendar, that probably means that this Fifth Circuit ruling will not have impact for this election. But again, everyone should pay attention to Democracy Docket because they will be covering that case as well as all of the other cases that are moving through the courts.
Marc, my final questions. 1, can Republicans appeal this decision from the Nevada Supreme Court? And 2, could the Fifth Circuit's decision ultimately impact Nevada's mail-in ballot receipt deadline?
Look, there's no basis for an appeal here, right? This is the Nevada Supreme Court interpreting Nevada state law. Now, can the Republicans always make their frivolous arguments about, independent state legislature theory? Maybe. I mean, they're trying that, Paige, as we know right now in Pennsylvania. We're watching that carefully. But I think it's a real long shot here. I mean, this is a very, very straightforward application of state law. It is also, I might add, a consistent interpretation of state law that the federal court had. So for them to argue that somehow this is totally an outrageous and novel interpretation of state law, I think won't get them any far. I'd really be surprised actually if they even took this one to the U.S. Supreme Court. So look, Nevada's not in the Fifth Circuit, right? Nevada's in the Ninth Circuit. And in fact, the Republican Party has been slow walking the appeal that they have filed with respect to the Nevada federal court case on this. So the Republicans clearly had a strategy to let the Fifth Circuit case go forward, hoping to score a win there. We'll see now what they do in the Ninth Circuit, whether they try to move that faster or not. But here's the deal, okay? In the end, the Republicans are going to lose this because it is a common sense policy that is consistent with federal law that states can count these ballots. So, they're going to try to make as much hay as they can out of the Mississippi case in the Fifth Circuit, but I don't believe it's going to impact anything, at least for 2024, though these fights will likely continue into 2025 and beyond. And for everyone who is watching this, this is the thing. The Republicans are filing these lawsuits in part because they want you to believe that your ballot may somehow not count. They want to sow chaos and confusion. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not going to work. They are losing these cases because they are wrong on the law. So please, if you have not already voted, make sure you have a plan to vote. Make sure you know what you need to bring to the polling place to vote. Make sure you know the hours and the locations of early voting or voting on Election Day, if that's what you choose to do. But most importantly, don't let the cynics win. Don't let Donald Trump convince you that your vote doesn't matter. Turn out and vote. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of Democracy Docket to stay up to date on all of the lawsuits about mail-in ballot, receipt deadlines, and more. Subscribe to Democracy Docket's free daily and weekly newsletters. We'll see you next time.